Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 25th of January. Thanks for watching. And anytime you need more weather information, you're welcome to call 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. And keep those numbers handy that you use and use them a little bit faster next time if you just write them down. You won't have to listen to the prompts every single time. You can always find our information online, starting at weather.gov/Alaska for the entire region of Alaska. Simply clicking on that map will take you to your local forecast office and your local forecast there, and you can bookmark that page for future reference. You can also find information from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit and the National Tsunami Warning Center, and make sure you like their Facebook page and Twitter account as well. That's at NWS_NTWC, and if you set that up in your phone just right, you can get that to actually give you a text when they issue alerts from the National Tsunami Warning Center. So a pretty handy device and another way to make sure you've got the very latest information for places that really matter to you the most. If you can't find what you're looking for or need some more help setting some of those things up, make sure you email me, david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help you as best I can. Here's a look at what's going on across the region. First, let's dive into this tiny little red area here just west of Valdez, on the map anyway. Up above Valdez is Thompson Pass, and that's where some of the winds have been blowing, snow has been falling, and all that put together has created blizzard conditions. The good news is that has probably subsided since just in the last several hours or so, and as we go ahead through the remainder of this evening and overnight, it's still going to be windy. There's still going to be blowing and drifting snow, but falling snow is one of the criteria for a blizzard, and we will not be having the falling snow is a big option there. So probably the blizzard conditions will be subsiding. If they're not done yet, they're almost done. And it looks like the blowing and drifting of the snow that has fallen will still be an issue there. So be prepared for winter driving conditions in Thompson Pass. If you're going and coming through that region, you already know that. But the winds are going to stay up for a while, so plan on that up above Valdez. Now the rest of the region, showing here in yellow, is wind chill advisories. And up around Broad Pass, north of Talkeetna and up toward Cantwell, we've been seeing wind chill values that have been down in the dirt, anywhere from 35 to pushing 45 below. It's going to be cold. However, wind chills will probably not be as severe as we go through the remainder of the evening. The winds will still be blowing, and with the temperature coming up a little bit, those two things should mitigate how bad the wind chill is, but it's still going to be cold. It's still going to be probably in that minus 25 to even minus 30 range at times around Broad Pass. So if you're in Cantwell, headed north or going up the Parks Highway, make sure you've got some extra gear in your car, as it's always possible to have something unexpected occur. Make sure you've got blankets and things to keep you warm, just in case you need a little bit of extra help as you go forward. We've also got wind chill advisories that are posted for the Denali region and the eastern Alaska range. Again, wind chill values there anywhere from 35 to 50 below. Same goes for areas up around the Brooks Range, all the way down into the upper Koyukuk, the Noatak Valley, out around the Kotzebue Sound region through Deering, out toward Shishmaref, St. Lawrence Island, the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta. This entire region is, the only thing we're talking about is cold and wind, and putting them together, wind chill advisories again. Most of these will stay up through tonight and into at least midday tomorrow. A few of these may drop off as we head through the evening hours if the wind settles down. The cold is not really changing too much. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and we've got low pressure sitting just south and west of Haida Gwaii. You can see the general flow is from the north and west across the Gulf of Alaska. A lot of fairly dry conditions really across most of the region. There are some pockets of snow out there. A look out west also indicates that we've got southerly winds building in across the western chain west of Shemya. And why is that important? Well, it's an overall pattern change. Now, it's going to be pretty slow to gradually move in here, but it suggests that a ridge is building out here across the western Bering, and that deep southerly flow could eventually change things up a little bit. Right now, though, it is encouraging the northerly flow across the west coast, and that is moving ice, and that is locking in the cold for the bulk of the 49th state. Out across southeast, you can see that gentle southeasterly flow, though, just east of low pressure. That's driving in a few more areas of clouds, probably a little bit of snow expected in the next 24 hours with that as that drives north there. But overall, the cold is winning for most locations. You can see low pressure across the northern Gulf. That's listed at about 988 millibars. A weak area of high pressure just north of the Alaska range, 1,024 millibars there. And there's our circulation we were watching on the satellite picture at 990 millibars. So what does that matter for southeast? Well, gales are fairly widespread across southeast, and if you don't have a gale, you have a small craft advisory. That's going to continue. And it's probably some strong winds up around the Lynn Canal for the time being. Watch for snow across south central. That'll continue through the evening and overnight hours. Out across the YK Delta, some areas of light snow there. The Alaska Peninsula also looking at snow. And look at this area right here, the back side of this low pressure system. A pretty tight squeeze on the isobars. A decent wind blowing through the Barren Islands and parts of Shelikof Strait. That outflow wind will continue there as well. So watch for some strong wind headlines at very least in your marine forecast coming up, and probably stronger winds than that. Out across the west, clouds continue to pour in from the south as we're looking at there. You can see just the hints, just a taste of the next low pressure system across the western Aleutian chain. There's some rain and snow for places like Shemya. Everywhere else still pretty dry. You've got a ridge of high pressure, our big cold stuff sitting up here, but that ridge and its control factor extends all the way down to the central chain. It's also feeding in cold, more of an easterly continental flow coming off of Canada. Try saying that 5 times fast. Easterly continental flow from Canada. Yeah, it's a little tricky. Low pressure sitting across south central at 995 millibars. Some pockets of snow showers there across the middle of Yukon Valley, and then here's our snow that's falling across south central as we speak. Snow showers there around Prince William Sound, extending out toward Kodiak and parts of the Alaska Peninsula. Now, south and east, there's still enough warm air being brought in across that eastern side. You'll probably see some coastal areas of rain and snow where it's not quite as cold as what you see a little bit closer to the inside passages there. That weak disturbance at 994 millibars, again helping to channel in some of those stronger winds across the region. As we go into Friday, really not a huge change. That coastal low kind of moves a little bit further north, and we kind of redevelop that center of circulation out across the central and southern Gulf at 1001 millibars. So periods of rain and snow fairly close to the outer coast, a better chance for light snow showers across parts of Sitka, Gustavus out toward Ketchikan, Metlakatla. Most of the interior, hardly a flake of snow to draw on the map. It's going to be the wind and the cold that you're talking about for the eastern parts of the Tanana Valley and the Yukon, all the way down toward the Alaska Range and just west into the Kuskokwim Valley, and probably some blowing snow through the Bering Strait region. Otherwise, just some fair weather clouds across the north slope. Again, you will be flirting with IFR conditions from time to time, as you'll see. Out west, that southerly flow and the next weather maker trying to work its way eastward. But remember, our big weather maker here at the surface is the high pressure system across the Chukchi at 1046 millibars, and that is just a big stone cold wall of cold sitting across the Bering and the central chain. It doesn't move much for Saturday. In fact, that front out across the west kind of falls apart. Really not much to show on the map as that weakens and it just turns into a trough with some rain out there. It doesn't look like we've got any big surge of a front right now, so we're going to focus back on the Gulf, and low pressure sitting at 997 millibars there. It's got a lot of kind of wet weather wrapped around it, fairly unsettled across the Gulf, but it's mainly going to be the coastal areas that pick that up. Places like Kodiak will be dealing with snow showers, coastal areas of the Kenai Peninsula and the Gulf, and rain and snow possible at times across the outer coast of southeast. And we're getting into that tight pressure gradient once again, where we've got a high located to your north of Juneau and Skagway and Haines, and that's going to start pushing a little bit more wind in from the north. So watch for some of those drainage and gap winds to develop across some of our more common areas, including Copper River Basin as well. We'll watch for some areas of low pressure here to help draw that out. In the meantime, the interior is pretty dry, blowing snow across the upper Yukon, the upper Tanana, all the way out into the Kuskokwim again, and with a lot of dry air in place. Icing potential is fairly low if you're flying, but again, there's not a lot of risk for snow either. So drier conditions there and just plain old cold. That high pressure system just east of Atkasuk and Nuiqsut and Barrow and Nukjavik. It's pushing that 1050 millibar level there. So keep your eye on that if you're flying there as we get into Saturday night, and Sunday as it kind of gets a little bit closer to some of that coldest, more dense air across the region. All right, let's look at the surface charts. Let's take a look at your temperatures. We know it's cold. How cold will it be? Anywhere from Fort Yukon at 16 below to 17 below in Arctic Village, 20 to 30 below temperatures, not wind chills, for the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound temperatures 15 to about 30 below in some cases. Nome, you're looking at about 21 below. McGrath, temperatures there anywhere from about 25 to 30 below. Bristol Bay temperatures not as bad, anywhere from 5 to about 15 below. Teens and 20s on the plus side of things for the Alaska Peninsula. 21 around St. Paul. You're looking at 26 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Teens and 20s for most of southeast, coastal southeast, let's say Sitka, about 33 degrees. South central, pretty close to zero. Clouds in place will keep temperatures up and probably warming up. For south central tomorrow, anywhere from the low to mid 20s to about 30 degrees as you get out toward Homer. Gokana and Glen Allen about 5 below, 20s and 30s for southeast. Some areas above freezing around Ketchikan and Sitka. 12 below for Eagle, 10 below for Fort Yukon. Tanana, you're looking at temps closer to 5 to 10 below. Ambler, about 20 below, and anywhere from 15 to 25 below for the North Slope. Nome, right at 0. Kotzebue, about 10 below. 10 for Savunga, that's plus 10, and 25 around St. Paul. Overnight low temperatures for Saturday morning, teens and 20s again for southeast. Coastal areas like Sitka down toward Craig and Klawock, probably closer to 30. South Central, single digits in low teens, 21 in Kodiak, 22 below in Fairbanks, looking at 28 below for Anaktuvuk Pass, about 30 below for many across the North Slope. Coastal areas closer toward Kaktovik, maybe a little bit milder, 24 below, but not by much. 10 to 20 below for the Kotzebue Sound region, and about 15 below or so around many parts of Norton Sound. Galena, though, looking at 26 below. Southwest, the YK Delta, 5 to 15 below. Nunivak Island, 9 below for you. St. Paul and St. George, 23 above, 27 above for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and closer to 30 for Adak and Atka. So get into the afternoon, South Central temps in the teens and 20s, 35 for Kodiak, 20s and 30s for Southeast. The interior, 5 to 15 below around the middle Tanana Valley, northward toward the slope. 15 to 25 below. Kotzebue Sound temperatures 5 to 10 below, anywhere from 5 above to about 0 or so for Norton Sound, including Unalakleet at 1 below. Bethel, you're looking at about 3 below, up the river a little bit more. Temps anywhere from 5 to 10 below into Ruby and Galena. South Central, expect temps in the 20s and 30s. St. Paul and St. George around 27.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. Patchy areas of IFR will be found across the western Alaska Range into the southern Bering and across the northern Gulf as low pressure is sitting right across the southern Gulf and high pressure aloft is trying to build out west. You'll see intermittent areas of MVFR across the middle and upper Tanana valleys as well as the Beaufort Seacoast and into the coastal plain with IFR starting out around the Dixon entrance and lingering across the northern Gulf. That's moving northward. Again, the low pressure here pushing that from south to north and pushing it closer to the northern and eastern Gulf Coast. Look for MVFR across Kodiak Island to Shelikof Strait. IFR conditions south of Port Huyton all the way out to just about Akitan. IFR conditions inside of Kotzebue Sound and close to Deering, and then out west you can see the next band of IFR shaping up, moving from west-east very slowly, but also a lot more of a south to north progression there on the western edge of high pressure. MVFR is expected to be fairly widespread across most of southeast and the North Slope. As you get into Saturday, again, most of the widespread areas of MVFR or IFR will be across the Gulf Coast. Watch for some of that to sneak into Bristol Bay, across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, still lingering across the interior of Kotzebue Sound, the upper Tanana Valley, and IFR becomes a little more widespread across the west from about Kiska to Attu. As we get into Saturday, that'll be where the focus for IFR remains, across the western Bering Sea and the western chain. MVFR is still breaking up a little bit more across the northern and eastern Gulf Coast. Southeast has improved by Saturday afternoon. Across parts of Prince William Sound, watch for MVFR, mainly along Portage Pass down toward Resurrection Bay and Seward. The Kenai Peninsula looks pretty good at this point, and MVFR should continue inside of Shelikof Strait and across the southern Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Bering Sea or eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Now for your pass conditions tomorrow, Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass expected to be VFR through all of your Friday. Rainy Pass expected to hold at VFR conditions there. Rainy Pass, again, probably looking to start out along IFR conditions. And Windy Pass looking for VFR conditions there. Isabel Pass and Mentasta Pass looking for MVFR conditions as we go throughout the day. As we get into Tenita Pass, watch for VFR conditions through at least most of the day. The morning may start out with some low clouds lingering around. Portage Pass holding at MVFR. Chilkoot and White Pass expected to be VFR through most of the day. Now as we get into freezing levels, the cold air from the northern coast and all the way through the Bering Sea continues to push southward. You can see that surface freezing line pushing even further into the eastern Gulf. That's holding right around southeastern right now, and the surface freezing line west of St. Matthew and the Pribilofs and right over Dutch Harbor and Unalaska. Out west, though, with that southern return flow, the freezing levels aloft climbing to 2, 4, 6, even 8,000 feet just south of the chain. But most of the state, really all of the state, is below freezing with the exception of the central and western chain. What about icing? Levels there range from about 3 to 5,000 feet across the Gulf, with generally isolated moderate risk across the Alaska Peninsula, the Gulf Coast, through Prince William Sound and most of southeastern Alaska. Just a little bit here of a patch of concern, generally north and west of Fairbanks, maybe a little around Tanana and up toward the Yukon Valley. Out across the west, that warmer southerly flow returning brings those levels up to about 4,000 feet over Kiska and Chemya. So here's the jet stream, and you can see why that's happening. High pressure sitting across the chain, forcing that wind in from the south around 80 to 95 knots across the western Bering, and then we get back into the low pressure control area across the Gulf of Alaska and the western Alaska range there, with that 95 to 120 knots coming in pretty much due north. And because of that, it's cold and dry air, so the risk of icing is greatly diminished across most of the interior with a lot of dry and cold air in place. That westerly flow coming across the Gulf seems to just be missing most of southeast, so we're keeping a lot of that activity moving into the Pacific Northwest, rather into southeastern Alaska at this point. Here's a look at 9,000-foot winds. You see our southerly winds across the western chain around 50 knots or so. Northerlies coming all the way down the west coast, right out of the Arctic, anywhere from 25 to 65 knots, the strongest of which across the eastern chain in the Alaska Peninsula, and light southeasterly winds coming over southeast Alaska and moving through the interior, anywhere from 15 to as much as about 30 knots, and we see similar control there around Friday on the 3,000 chart there. The southeasterlies coming over southeast, still fairly light, a little bit stronger here across south central, up to about 35 to 40 knots. North and easterly winds coming down the west coast and through the central and eastern chain. Those come up to about 40 to 50 knots over the Alaska Peninsula. And then out west, high pressure's back in charge here. And you see a little bit of a weak ridge, and the wind's not too fast there, but out across the western chain, they pick up quickly to about 35 to 50 knots. So turbulence concerns will mainly be due to gap flow across the Bristol Bay region tomorrow, 4 to about 5,000 feet. Southeast outer coast below 4,000, and across the western end of the chain, also below 4,000 feet.
Once in a blue moon eclipse.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky.
Blue moon.
Oh, I see. You're just going to burst into song because we have a blue moon coming up on January 31st. Not only that, but this
blue moon.
This blue moon will also occur at the same time as a lunar eclipse.
Wait, a lunar eclipse and a blue moon at the same time? That sounds pretty sweet.
I know. Let's show you.
Okay, we have our skies set up for Wednesday, January 31st at 5 a.m. facing west. Yes, that's right, stargazers. You're going to have to get up early or stay up really late to see this lunar eclipse.
We can see the full moon hanging to the left of the Gemini twins, the stars Pollux and Castor, and almost directly above the star named Procyon that marks the body of the Little Dog constellation Canis Minor.
Let's first explain why this moon is considered a blue moon. It's not because the moon will actually turn blue. It's because of a 20th century piece of trivia that just wedged itself into popular culture.
That's right, Dean. Most people call the second full moon in a calendar month a blue moon. It was first explained this way in a Sky and Telescope magazine article in 1946, and it's stuck ever since.
Since the moon takes about 29.5 days to go through a cycle of phases, you can, on occasion, have a full moon on the 1st or 2nd of the month, and another one on the 30th or 31st of the month.
And that's exactly what happened this month. We had a full moon on January 1st, and another one is coming up on January 31st. See, no blue color. Now, lunar eclipses happen when the Earth is directly between the Sun and the Moon. The Earth casts a shadow that goes out into space in a cone shape. When the Moon orbits into the shadow cone, we have a lunar eclipse.
This can only happen at a full moon, but doesn't happen every full moon. The moon's orbit is tilted a little bit, so only during the rare occasions when everything lines up do we have an eclipse. So we have a rare blue moon on top of a rare lunar eclipse. Wow. Timing is important here, and we'll be using Eastern time, so you'll have to adjust depending on your time zone. We need to set the sky in motion and move our time forward.
At around 6:48 a.m. Eastern Time, you'll start to see the rounded shadow of the Earth encroach onto the lunar surface. But then, wait, what was that?
That would be the ground. For people on the eastern half of the country, the moon will set before the total eclipse begins.
Oh, man. But the farther west you live, the more you'll see. At 7:52 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the shadow will cover the entire moon.
We call this totality, and that should last until 9:07 a.m. during totality, the moon won't completely disappear. Some sunlight bends through the Earth's atmosphere and still reaches the moon.
This light turns the moon an eerie shade of orange. What makes a lunar eclipse so cool is that you never know what color it'll be. Will it be a pale gray, a bright orange, or a blood red?
Only the shadow knows. Each total eclipse is a total surprise. So, get ready for the blue moon lunar eclipse coming up on January 31st.
The moon won't turn blue, but it should turn all sorts of grays, pinks, and oranges as the eclipse rolls on.
Now, remember that this eclipse will happen in the morning before sunrise. We don't want you looking for it on the night of the 31st. You would have missed the whole thing.
And remember that if you are on the eastern half of the United States, you'll only see a partial eclipse before it sets below the western horizon.
But if you're out west or in Hawaii, you'll see a total eclipse. The wonders of the heavens are out there if you keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge, and you can see the pack ice continues to be pushed south and west with that north and easterly flow moving. We expect over the next couple days the ice edge to advance about 40 miles or so. So a lot of movement going on there. And coming up, if the winds pick up even more, that ice edge could be advancing even faster. So pay attention to how things are progressing there. You can see the ice has moved into Bristol Bay and expanded there, also around northern parts of Cook Inlet and now south of St. Lawrence Island. More ice information anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Looking at gales and small craft advisories for most of southeast, gusts up to 55 knots across the northern Lynn Canal, 40 knots with an 11-foot sea down a little bit further south into Stevens Passage, 35 knots with a 50-knot gust, 25 knots from the south and east through Clarence Strait. And offshore winds will be strong at times with the strongest gusts outside of Cross Sound and from Gustavus all the way up toward Yakutat with 14-foot seas and gusts up to 50 knots. You can see on Sunday, northerlies set up a little bit more across the region, 20 to 25, 4 to 7 foot seas there. The gusts not part of this forecast. On Saturday, offshore winds ranging from 20 to 25 with about 7-foot seas across the outer coast for Saturday. For South Central, look for northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. The stronger gusts outside of the Copper River Delta region. Gusts to 45 knots, 30 knots sustained with 10-foot seas and 7-foot seas as you move out toward Resurrection Bay and the eastern Barrens. Now, northerlies coming through Cook Inlet will also pick up south of Calgon Island. 9 to 10-foot seas there with a 30 and 40-knot wind there for Friday. As we get into Saturday, not a lot of change. Still looking at 20 to 30 knots across Cook Inlet, 5 to 7-foot seas. Easterlies, though, diminish across the northern Gulf, 15 to 20 with 6-foot seas in most areas. And northerlies inside of Prince William Sound also settling down with 2-foot seas on Saturday. For the Bering Sea coast, you're looking at 30 knots inside of Bristol Bay, 45 knots down toward Cold Bay with 19-foot seas or stronger northerly winds again. And that's the same wind that's advancing the ice southward. Across Shelikof Strait, 35 knots with 7-foot seas, and the north and western Gulf, 35 to as strong as 50 knots sustained with gusts of 50 and 65 knots. Storm force winds there with 9 to 14-foot seas on Friday. Things improve a little bit more on Saturday. Notice the stronger winds and higher seas still focusing on the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula. 5 to 12-foot seas there, 7 to 10-foot seas across the Pacific, with 5-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait on that northerly wind there just west of Kodiak Island. There's our higher seas again around Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and then you get a little bit of a break right under the ridge for the central chain, and then out across the west, those southerlies pick up. Southeasterlies 30 to about 45 knots, 12 to 26-foot seas. And out across the eastern chain, you're looking at 15 to 17-foot seas on the northerly wind, 35 to 45 on Friday. Things improve a little bit more on Saturday as you get into northerly winds, 11 to 13-foot seas. The seas still staying up. Out west, southeasterlies are still blowing, and you get 30 to 35 knots sustained. Higher seas, though, starting to come in around 20 to 25 knots on the Pacific side, so watch for those changes heading through the rest of the weekend. For the west coast, northerlies over the ice. You're looking at 20 to 25 around St. Lawrence Island into Norton Sound. But once you get south of that, the winds pick up a little bit more. 30 to 40 knots south of Nunivak Island, 25 knots around St. Paul and St. George with a 9-foot sea. On Saturday, northerlies diminish just a bit, 15 to 30 knots near the ice pack in the Yukon-Kuskokwim coast. St. Matthews, St. Paul, and St. George are looking at an east and northeasterly wind with about 7 to 9-foot seas on Saturday. For the North Slope, light winds around the Beaufort Sea coast, 5 to 10 knots. The Chukchi coast, a little stronger, 10 to 20 knots. They're all coming out of the north and into St. Lawrence Island at 25 knots, again helping to move the ice along. Not a big change there for the Beaufort Sea coast on Saturday. An east and northeasterly wind for the Chukchi, and northerlies through the Bering Strait there for your Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather. Blizzard warnings in effect for the Thompson Pass region. Wind chill advisories for many locations across south central and into the north. And for most areas in the interior, the west coast, and the north slope, those wind chill advisories cover what it would feel like, 35 to about 50 below in many cases there. So if the wind is blowing and it's cold, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Cover exposed skin as frostbite can occur very quickly, and in some cases anywhere from 5 to about 30 minutes. So not a whole lot of time there to be exposed. For Friday, look for coastal areas to see some rain and snow showers. Most likely you're going to see a snowflake or two if you're along the outer coast for sure of southeast or around the Bristol Bay region. Wind will be an issue as the blizzard conditions improve and go away around Thompson Pass. Blowing and drifting snow will still be an issue there. So if you're driving through, coming and going from Valdez or the Copper River Valley, make sure you're prepared for winter driving conditions there. That's not going to get a whole lot better very quickly. High pressure across the north slope, packing it in for Saturday. Watch for winds to continue across the interior, and the cold will stay in place for many locations. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. We'll see you right here again tomorrow night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.